almost exactly 5 years ago, today, as I record this, I released an episode that I called 5 Things. And it was one of the first solo episodes. It was probably the first real hodgepodge. And what it was, it may not surprise you to hear, was me talking about 5 things. All right, 5 very separate topics, all in one episode, all right? And it seems to me, after the last 2 episodes that were very researched, topical, focused, curated, a 5 things approach might be kind of a nice change of pace. So that's what we're going to do this week, kids. 5 things. A good thing, an educational thing, an inspiring thing, a thing to check out, and a funny thing, all right? And we'll get to them on the other side. Hello, you're listening to the John Huff Podcast. Oh, yay. I have to do the histories in really short bursts. I'm amazed always. I'm amazed always. When I get to the end of a superficial history, just how much freaking work goes into it. And it may not seem like it from my presentation of Art Deco last week, but a ton of time and effort and work, mental energy went into that episode. And, you can only do so many of those, I think. I mean, there's a reason why Dan Carlin releases 1, maybe 2 episodes of hardcore history a year. Now, granted, his episodes are 4 or 5 hours long. Takes quite a lot of time to record that, of course. But I think just the sheer effort, the sheer mental energy that goes into creating something like that. And I'm not comparing remotely my histories to Dan Carlin's histories. There's a reason why I call them superficial. I'm just saying, takes a lot out of you. And so this week I felt like having a little fun. And to be fair, I haven't had a lot of time either. I've been busy. I've been doing stuff. There's been stuff beyond the podcast that has required my time and attention. So I haven't had a time really to look into anything more deeply this week. And maybe you want to change of pace too. So this time around, we're doing 5 things. When I released the original 5 Things episode, which was, I think, the 25th of February, 2020. Oh yeah, we got like over a 3-year legacy going here, kids. I really liked that format. And at the time I was experimenting with solo episodes, it was a brand new thing. And I liked it, and I didn't really know what to do with it, though. And I thought for a minute, you know what? This 5 things approach is kind of cool. Maybe I should change the whole podcast to being 5 Things with John Huff. Didn't do that. Probably won't do that. But I liked the format, and there are times when you come into recording where you haven't really got one big, substantial, meaty thing to hang the episode on. And having a series of things, makes it possible to do an episode. I like that approach. Hopefully you'll like that approach too. We're going to kick it off. The first of 5 things for this episode. 1 good thing. All right, 3 years ago, the good thing was that I was eating solid food again and keeping it down. After having endured horrendous food poisoning on the way back home from Texas, where I was on tour for a month with Sarah Smith and Ken the Zen, caught hold of some horrendous food poisoning, told the story on that episode. Go back and find it if you like. Hard for me. I listened to it today because I couldn't remember what the 5 things were. So I wanted to remember, what were the 5 things? What were the categories? So I went back and I listened to it, and difficult for me to listen to my presentation. I so admire these podcasts that come out of the gate fully formed, and the tone is right, and the editing and the production is right, and it just remains this consistent thing throughout the life of the podcast. Not the case with me, kids, and so I still struggle sometimes going back and listening to the older episodes because they were not fully formed in terms of presentation. That aside, I went back and listened. And yeah, it was the food poisoning episode. So if you want to hear an awful story about being really, really, really sick on the road, that's the one to go and hear. Today's good thing, a little less violent than that, okay? And the good thing today is that, to a certain extent, music is coming back. The pandemic sucked the royal life out of the live entertainment industry and out of the music industry. And for a while now we've been able to hold events, there have not been that many events to hold. A lot of bands did not survive COVID. A lot of venues most certainly did not survive COVID. And so while, the gate was thrown open again to begin performing, it's not as though there was a mad rush to do that. A lot of bands still have not got themselves going again. And like I said, venues are gone. It's a struggle sometimes to find places to even book shows. It's been a challenging time, and it's kicked a lot of people out of the industry, all right? But I am pleased to report that music is beginning. There are green shoots. There are signs of life. Just this morning, I am recording on hot Monday afternoon. Normally, I would record Monday morning. Couldn't do that because, as it were, I was recording this morning. Recording properly on a drum set in a studio. Can't tell you exactly what the project was about, but I was in one of my favorite studios with one of my favorite people, the great Kyle Ashbourne. I was in recording tracks on a couple of songs that will be released very, very soon for a special kind of project. Can't tell you much more about that, but what a treat! What a treat this morning to have music stuff that I had to do. Wow! What a cool thing. Recording remains a novelty to me, but it's a freaking challenge, man. I mean, you really gotta have your time together as a drummer when you go into a recording studio. Now, I practice all the time to a metronome or a click track. All right, for those of you who don't know, most of the music you hear recorded is recorded to what they call a click track, okay? Which means there is a certain tempo for the song, and in your ears, you hear a metronome or a click pulsing on that beat, all right? Click, 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 click. I like a woodblock sound myself. Other people like a loop to play with, whatever. You record to that because that way everybody's recording to the same click track, which means everything is in time, theoretically. And when you have to come in later and you lay down vocals on it or guitar parts on it or who knows what, when you add stuff in, everything is in time so you can trust it and you can punch in and you can do it, right? It's a very challenging thing to do. And a lot of guitar players, keyboard players, whatever, especially, I'm not singling anyone or anything out here, but I've found in my past experience that a lot of people, songwriters, whatever, they write their songs and they play them live and whatever, but they never do that, or they often don't do that against a click track or a metronome, right? And so they come into the studio, and a lot of times it's the first time they've ever encountered a click track, and it's a real struggle to play on it and to play in time, right? For a drummer, you should be versed in that, all right? But even so, even if, like me, you practice to a click all the time, you get into the studio situation and there's just a certain degree of pressure that gets added to that. And you find out very quickly that even though you practice on a click, you might not be paying all that much attention to how good your practice sounds, right? And so you have this groove that you like that you don't realize you rush when you play it. Or you go to crank that fill at the end of a phrase and you realize, even that simple eighth note roll, you're not actually playing in time, So you're coming crashing on the one and you're behind the click or you're ahead of the click. Now, there are times when you want to be behind or ahead of the click. This is a very conscious, very skillful thing to do, to play what they call on top of the beat or to play behind the beat, but it's deliberate, all right? We are intentionally working around the click, and that happens live for a lot of people who play live to a click, I don't usually. I usually have a flashing metronome. So I'll have lights flashing, the pulse to me, just so I can keep things relatively under control. Because what normally happens in a live situation, you're amped up, you're playing together, songs tend to speed up. That's usually what happens. So throughout the course of a song, you might jump up 2, 3, 4, 5, 7 beats per minute, depending on what you're playing, depending on what's going on. And a lot of time, that's perfectly fine. All right, a lot of times, that's perfectly cool. But if you are playing in an act where it's a lot of kind of mid-tempo stuff and the pocket, the groove really counts, sometimes you will speed it up out of a range that feels all that good anymore. Better to lay back, better to pull behind the beat because it gives it a bit of groove and a bit of swagger, right? Very, very difficult thing to do to play around the click that way. Now, if you're playing with tracks, you got to be on the click. All right, you got to be bang on the click and you got to be bang on those tracks. Otherwise, there's going to be stuff happening that you're not in time with, and it's going to be obvious and it's going to be bad. All right. Anyways, in the studio, this is my encouragement to all you singer-songwriters out there who write great songs and play them live, but do not play them with a click. When it comes time to get into the studio and record those things, you're going to whip out your acoustic guitar and start playing, and you're going to realize you're not playing in time. And that's not going to work if the band is recording to a click. And it especially is not going to be great for the drummer who is recording the song on a click track against what they will usually call a scratch track that you have prepared for the drummer to play, right? So I need a track of the song so that I know where I'm at in the song while I'm playing. I'm on a click trying to play it in time, and whoever has recorded the scratch track, that could be an acoustic guitar and a vocal, whatever, is not in time because that person has never really practiced on a click track before. Creates a freaking mayhem because the drummer is trying to play to a click against a scratch track that is not in time. And it's very, very difficult to fight against the tempo and the timing of the music you're hearing when it is not on the click track that you're trying to play with. So, all you singer-songwriters out there, all right, all you instrumentalists of any type, if you plan to be doing any kind of recording, get your butt sat down and practice against a metronome, okay? It will make life so much easier in the studio when you get there, and your drummer will be less inclined to throw a drumstick at your head. Anyways, I was in the studio today recording. That is a wonderful thing. I have had some gigs beginning to pop up in the summertime. All right, it is still not pre-COVID, but, against the summer, certainly of 20 and of 21 and even of 22, things seem to be a little bit busier. So it feels as though music is coming out of its shell. All right, I'm going to talk about, I think, a little bit later, some of the gigs with reference to one of the other 5 things we're talking about. But it's a good thing for me and for a lot of the listeners of this podcast that music is beginning to come back. Shows are happening. People are starting to play again. They're knocking the dust off those instruments. I got gigs booked. I'm in the studio recording. Freaking fabulous. Yay. Music is coming back. Now get your butts out to shows, all right? Do not leave people hanging. Go out there, support your venues. Venues dropped like freaking flies during the pandemic. We lost 5 or 6 in L-Town alone. Go out, support venues, support indie bands, support indie artists, support live music, or I promise you, you're gonna lose it, man. Now let's get to one educational thing. And if there is a meat and potatoes to this episode, this is the one, all right? And it's going to be a little bit tricky because I'm not sure I even understand the educational thing I'm talking about, and I'm even less sure I can be articulate about it But this is hearkening back to when this podcast was more of a motivational thing. There was a personal development angle to this, and we're hearkening back to that. An educational thing, all right? I had an insight last week that I think is worth talking about. Existential, spiritual, life hack, personal development insight last week. Now, I was listening to a presentation by Michael Singer. I don't know if you know who Michael Singer is. He is an author. He is the author of The Untethered Soul, which is kind of a modern spiritual classic, which I've not read, at least all of it, and I probably should. And he's a yogi, and he's a meditation expert, and he's a speaker. Michael Singer's one of the guys, okay? If you're floating around the kind of Ram Dass, Joe Dispenza, Gabor Mate, this kind of crowd, you've probably run across Michael Singer, okay? Oprah. Michael Singer, a great dude and a very insightful and learned man, and I think he comes at it from the kind of angle that I'm coming at it from these days, which is Eastern traditions, Eastern kind of spirituality. I mean, he's a yogi, all right? So he's pulling from, I think, the Hindu playbook, probably the Taoist hymn book. And those are my hymn books these days. If I have hymn books, I'm pulling from those kind of Eastern traditions, Eastern philosophies, because they resonate with me, okay? And so one of the things that Michael Singer is really great on is this concept of flowing with life. Stop me if you've heard this before, this phrase, go with the flow. I thought I knew what that meant. I thought I had a grip on what going with the flow is. And it turns out I was wrong, or at least I was not all the way right. There was a layer to this that I had not considered before until I was listening to Michael Singer last week. And he talks a lot about just simply approaching life with a certain curiosity, I guess, and a certain sense of surrender. And that is what this flow is that we're talking about. They say, hey, go with the flow, man. Stuff happens. Don't let it get to you. Let it kind of roll off your back. Just go with the flow. People say that, and it's very cliche, and it looks good on a t-shirt. But I don't think we inquire much more deeply into that, and it's worth doing, all right? This popped out at me last week, what going with the flow is actually all about, and what flowing with life is all about. This is one that's really important for me, all right? Since the anxiety spells began, primarily COVID onward, and I have been called and pulled into this notion of surrendering, all right? Surrendering to something higher. Call that what you want, the universe, God, Krishna, flying spaghetti monster. Surrendering to some higher thing. Could even be your own higher self, all right? Big John, Little John. We've talked about this before. And this has been a constant struggle for me, all right? Because ego does not want to let go. Ego does not want to surrender. Ego wants control. Ego wants things the way ego wants it. Ego wants attention. Ego wants to stand out, right? Ego is not into surrender unless ego is sure that that surrender is going to deliver all those things it wants, right? Control, certainty, attention, etc., etc., etc. And my struggles with anxiety have been a catalyst for a deeper discussion within myself about this sense of the cosmos, this sense of the universe, this sense of whether there is a flow, of whether there is something higher to be surrendered to. Surrender's a loaded freaking word, okay? In our popular culture and in our consciousness, we don't value surrendering. Surrendering is seen as bad. The French, cheese-eating surrender monkeys. Anyone who calls them that, by the way, on the basis of the early days of World War II, has not studied the Battle of Verdun or anything else from the First World War, okay? I digress. This notion of surrender scares a lot of people off because it seems weak, right? And it's not that. Surrender as I'm learning to understand it, is much, much more about cooperating with whatever this flow is, all right? Life comes along and it presents things to you, and you think you're going with the flow when you just kind of accept them and move on with your day. But what I realize is that there is another level to this. And I didn't get this until it twigged with me when I was listening to Michael Singer last week. Because you can say you're going with the flow without realizing how much roadblock, how much resistance you're throwing into things. Let me try to illustrate this. All right, I've been offered gigs. I'm starting to be offered gigs, all right? And in a lot of cases, when I get offered gigs, my first reaction is one of resistance. Now, granted, I'm in a weird place with music right now, all right? Because I don't know what the future holds, and I don't know my place in it anymore. There was a time when I was trying to be a full-timer that seems, I mean, even at the time, it seemed a long shot. It seems a longer shot now. And so I don't know. I just don't know where I fit with music, where music fits in my life anymore, and where I want it to be, and how that's going to unfold. All right, this is all ego thinking, by the way, and this is not surrendered thinking. So I get offered gigs, and my first reaction, in a lot of cases, unconsciously, is one of resistance. And right off the bat, I start thinking about what's wrong with this offer. The venue, the timing, where it is, who the act is, what the music is. You know, I've got in my mind this sense of an ideal musical situation, all right? I've got some parameters that I have laid out to the ether, that the ingredients, I guess, of what I consider my ideal musical situation. Not going to say what those are, but they exist. I have in my mind what the ideal might be, right? And then you get offered something that doesn't seem to be all of that, and right off the bat, you begin to balk at it, and you sort of hum and haw, and then there's all these reasons that come in for why not to do this. And I realized that this is not going with the flow. This is not flowing with life. To put up resistances to things is to fight against life. So I get offered a gig with Artist X, all right? And what Artist X plays is not really my favorite thing to play and not really where I want to go. And maybe it's at a venue that's not my favorite. And it's 100% okay to trust your intuition on these things. You know, sometimes things will jump out at you and be like, nope, I don't want to do that. I want no part of that. All right, that is not an act of fighting the universe. That's just kind of knowing intuitively what ain't going to work for you. But if you're in this sort of gray, murky zone where it's like, okay, this gig came, it's not really what I want, but, I began to realize how much resistance I was throwing up. Immediately defaulting to what could be wrong with this situation, to what the negative aspects of this are, and that is not flowing. All right, that is not flowing with life. Much better, much more mature, much more potential in the notion of this gig is offered to me, and looking at it and be like, okay, this is what's on offer right now. This is what the universe is bringing into my experience for my consideration. And instead of immediately throwing up walls around it, right? Instead of immediately fighting it, to surrender to it, to flow with it, is to say, okay, I will accept that gig because that is what's presented to me. That is what you have to look at this as something intentional, right? This is what the universe has brought to me right now for my consideration. My intuition is not screaming, don't do it. My ego or the scared part of me or whatever, this resistant part of me is throwing up walls around it, right? Do not throw up walls around the opportunity. That is resisting. And you are pulling resistance, you are pulling resistant energy into this potential. And you choke it that way. And I realized that I was doing this all the time. Almost every gig that popped up, this resistance came into me, and that's worth inquiring into, right? There's something more in there that I need to look at. But then I had this realization. You can say all you want that you're surrendering and you're going with the flow, but then when the flow presents something to you as an opportunity and you immediately throw up walls around it, and you immediately look at the negative aspects of it, and you immediately look at why it can't work, you are not flowing at all. You are resisting. You are fighting. And this may seem obvious to some of you, but to me, it just hadn't even really occurred that to go with the flow, to flow with life, is to accept that opportunity, see what could be really great about it, and do it in good conscience, and do it in good effort, and do it in good faith, and roll with it, right? Because you don't know. You don't know that maybe this ideal you've got in your mind of what you want a musical situation to be, you don't know that this isn't the gateway to it. This is the other thing, right? It's like you don't allow the universe, you don't allow synchronicity, you don't allow life to present to you the fastest, easiest, most enjoyable route to that thing you want. You know, when the first thing that gets presented to you isn't the thing, you're like, this isn't right. I don't want to do this. But you don't know if taking that thing, this new opportunity, and flowing with it doesn't flow you right in to where you want to be. Or if it doesn't flow you right into realizing what your ideal wasn't right at all. And that this thing you've been given, this opportunity you've been given, actually turns out to be what it is you want, that you didn't even know, right? But when you start resisting, you kill that. You put negative energy into it. You put fighting, resistant energy into it, and it causes consternation. That's the other side of it. So you get offered a gig, you're not sure about the gig, and you begin amping yourself up about all the things that are wrong with this freaking gig, and you don't know what to do, and you get yourself in this sort of state, get yourself in a tizzy, and all of that negative energy just accumulates in you and accumulates around it. And you begin to get stressed out, and you begin to be like, music is such a pain, music is such a hassle, nothing is working, yada, yada, yada. When had you surrendered and flowed and said, this is what's being offered to me, it seems reasonable, I'm going to accept it, I'm going to surrender to it, I'm going to flow with it and give it my best, and here's all the reasons why it could be really cool. So much less consternation, so much fighting within yourself. And it's important to pay attention. I think it's important to pay attention when you have a decision to make, when you have a yes or no to say. Pay attention to whether you feel this resistance in yourself. And it is not, in my experience, an abdominal resistance. All right, that's an intuitive thing. That's something to pay attention to. You know if what you're feeling is a genuine intuition that says, no, not for me, or if what you're feeling is some other weird ego resistance thing. And if you're feeling that, then you are not, I don't think, really surrendering and really flowing. And I think when you start flowing, the way gets that much easier. And the lightness kind of comes into your life. And then you begin to sense positive momentum instead of all of this resistance and fighting. And I didn't realize until it clicked with me with Michael Singer last week that I've been throwing up so much resistance around music. And I've been throwing up so much resistance around this podcast. And I mean, don't even get me started on writing, for crying out loud. For me, this is an extremely important, useful, educational insight. So pay attention. Take a look this week. If you're making decisions, if you've got opportunities coming to you, stop seeing those as threats. Start seeing them as opportunities. Start thinking about how you flow with that, how you accept that, how you do it to the best of your ability and in good intention. And then just pay attention to how that feels. Pay attention to what the outcome of that is. Stop, and this is me talking to me, man. Stop putting up resistance around things by looking for the negative aspects. Focus on the positive aspects. Focus on the potential My therapist and I have talked at length about this. Because I'm so cautious, because I'm so guarded, because I'm so reluctant to make the wrong decision all the freaking time, she said to me, in any given situation, instead of saying, this can't work and this isn't working, open up your curiosity and say, how can this work? Right? How can this work? It immediately flips the script. It flips the energy on the situation. Suddenly you're looking for solutions. Suddenly you're looking for potential and not being dragged back down, being sunk back down by these negative thoughts and producing ultimately negative impulses. Perception is reality. And I've had to learn this, and now this is a brand new thing. Being aware of just how much resistance I bring to situations and how that affects things. So that's my educational piece, all right, this week. Learn really to go with the flow, to flow with life. Accept the opportunities with good intention, in good faith, and look for all the reasons that they could be great. And if that flow presents an opportunity for you to go to patreon.com/JohnHuffPodcast and sign up for one of my memberships, pay attention to that flow too, all right? Time for the Patreon plug. Very quickly, there is a Patreon page for this podcast. It is patreon.com/JohnHuffPodcast. Take a breath. Where, for the low, low price of $5 a month, I have one tier of membership. You can support this program. I do not want to do ads. I do not want to do ad reads. I do not want to run ads and have sponsors on the program. I find that stuff intrusive and annoying. I've gone the Patreon route to try and monetize the show because it leaves me in 100% creative control for starters. I am not beholden to any advertisers, and it makes the experience, I hope, a little more listenable for you, all right? The true audience of this podcast. You can think of it, $5 a month, as just a little tip, a tip of $1.25 for every episode that I do. If you're getting something from the program, if you are being inspired, if you are being educated, if you are being entertained, if you are learning stuff that's worth learning, if you're just simply enjoying having a friendly voice on the airwaves, please do consider signing up to my Patreon. I have not lately posted a lot of custom content there, but I will start again. Patreon.com/JohnHuffPodcast. I would so appreciate you supporting the show in that way. And to everyone who has so far, you have my deepest and most sincere gratitude. Don't want to do Patreon? That's okay. The show will remain free and accessible wherever you enjoy fine podcasts. You can help me by sharing these episodes, okay? If you like them, if you're getting something from them, if you think somebody else might enjoy them too, like King Zach said, man, go tell somebody. You can follow me on your socials, Facebook, John Huff Podcast, TikTok. I'm still debating TikTok, John Huff Podcast, Instagram, John Huff Podcast. Sign up, follow along, participate in the discussion, Talk to me about what you want to hear on here. Tell your friends. I keep asking for ratings and reviews. They have been slow in coming, kids. Warm my cockles for me, would you? Drop on to your favorite podcast platform. Takes 5 seconds to leave me a 5-star rating. Takes 30 seconds to leave me a review that says, I enjoy this program. I get value from this program. You might want to check it out. Please do that. Please warm up my February. Drop me a rating and review. It would tickle me to no end. Thank you so much, everyone, for your support thus far. Patreon.com/JohnHuffPodcast. One inspiring thing. For that, we go to the Arsenal Arseblog, which turned 21 years freaking old this week. I'm not going to make you listen to me go on about, Arsenal being still number one in the Premier League this year and looking like they have a real hope in hell of winning this freaking thing against all predictions at the start of the season. It has been a freaking roller coaster, man. I will not deny floating around my basement doing the airplane after Arsenal scored to go ahead of Aston Villa 3-2 a couple games ago. I know. I'm a grown-ass man. But I feel that freaking deeply. All right, now part of my experience of Arsenal, part of my Arsenal fandom, a big part of it has been the Arsenal Arseblog, and that was created by a cat called Andrew Mangan, who was a guest on this podcast back in the early days, back in the interview days. I reached out to Andrew, asked him to come on the show, talk about this incredible story he is and the Arsenal Arseblog is, and he graciously agreed to do that, and it was a crazy thing, man, to hear that voice that I listen to a couple times a week talking to me. Very, very freaking weird, man. But it was cool, all right? Now, if you're out there right now and you have a podcast and you're looking for a guest and you're used to listening to me and you would like my voice talking at you, hit me up, all right? I am always happy to come on a podcast and talk about whatever's on your freaking mind, all right? Andrew did that for me. It was surreal and so freaking cool. And I'm inspired by the Arsenal Arseblog. And you do not have to be an Arsenal fan. You don't even have to be a football fan or even a sports fan to be inspired by this story, okay? 21 years ago, Andrew Mangan, living, I think at the time in Spain, is wondering about, getting better at using web stuff, building websites, this kind of thing, dipping his toe into the online world, which was pretty fledgling back in those days. And he needed a reason to do that. He needed a project. And so what he did is he started a blog so he could learn how to start a blog. And he chose as the topic for that blog, Arsenal Football Club, of which he was and is a fan, as am I. And so he just began every freaking day getting up and writing a blog post about Arsenal. What happened in the game last night, what's happening in the transfer market, yada, yada, yada. Whatever the news of the day was about Arsenal, Andrew got up every freaking day and wrote a blog post. Now, he started this 21 years ago, having no idea that 2 decades, 2 decades down the line, there would also be the Arsenal Arsecast, which is probably the preeminent podcast about Arsenal on the planet, of which there are many. He would have won several awards as a pioneer of fan media, which is all the rage now. An early adopter, a pioneer of fan media, right? Andrew and the Arseblog. So he's got 21 years of doing the Arseblog, of producing the Arsecast, and now there's the Arsenal Women podcast. This umbrella of media that Andrew has created. Oh, and along the way, his full-time job. All right, his full-time job is fan media for Arsenal. All because 21 years ago, the guy sat down to try to learn how to use these online tools, and he started writing about a passion of his, which was Arsenal. And I find this so freaking inspiring. It was inspiring to learn about the early days of this project. He never imagined this was coming. He was just learning how to blog, but he was so good at it and so dedicated to it and so sincere about it and so passionate about it that it turned into a thing, and very quickly it gathered a following. And then, he was intrepid, and when podcasting came along, he jumped in on that too, faced a lot of fears, no doubt, had to learn how to use this technology, had to learn how to build an audience, and it came with him. And he's so pro at it and so freaking good at it. And his commentary and his insight on the game and his guests who provide that as well, it's a super pro operation, turning out super pro work. And he has turned that into his full-time job. And how freaking inspiring is that? To start a blog kind of on a whim one day, dedicated to something that you're really, really passionate about. And that turns into a 2+ decade of work that's become a full-time job and has become a thing and has become so important in the Arsenal universe. I find it hugely inspiring that dude followed an intuition, started at nothing, learned, figured it out, got better, got better tools, got better tech, jumped into a new platform in podcasting, learned that, got better at it, got new tools. The dude went for it. He learned along the way, had some ups and downs, learned a lot of lessons, but turned this thing into the standard for fan media, for fan-based podcasting, for fan-based blogging. And it's just such an inspiring story to see what that turned into. And this is my encouragement. It remains my encouragement, man. Good things happen when you put yourself out there. It was a thrill for me to have Andrew on my podcast to share that message, because he's got the track record to back it up. Let it be an inspiration to you. All right? You're thinking about whatever it is. Building a home recording studio. Don't know how. Begin and learn. Thinking about a podcast. Thinking about writing a book. Thinking about doing a blog. That still exists. Thinking about starting a YouTube channel. Thinking about whatever. Be inspired by the example of Andrew Mangan and the Arseblog, that you can begin at nothing, and if you do the thing as best you can with an open mind, with curiosity, with intention, it can turn into something far beyond what you ever imagined. And I think when he sat down 21 years ago to write the first blog for the Arseblog, I don't think he ever imagined that 21 years later he would have the legacy that he has created, that he would have the fan base and the following that he has, that he would have this career, that he would have this entity, that he would have this freaking life. And it's so exciting, but it does not happen unless you begin. And it does not happen unless you continue. And it does not happen unless you are open to learning and getting better and improving. So I am inspired by Andrew Mangan and by the Arseblog, and I am offering my congratulations to him and to that whole team for 21 years and setting just a supreme example of what is possible when you put yourself out there, all right? One thing to check out. I'll be very quick about this one. Ladies and gentlemen, check out the new record by Steel Panther. Yes! The mighty Panther is back. Last week, they released finally On the Prowl. That's their, 6th record now? They're cranking them out, man. They're cranking them out somehow. And Steel Panther could just as easily have been my inspiration for this episode, because I remain amazed at what happened there. I mean, those guys kicked around the music industry for a long, long time, collectively and as individuals, almost getting there and not quite getting there. And then they're on the Sunset Strip. They're playing hair metal covers to very dedicated audiences every week. They start writing their own tunes, and they decide to do this kind of slapstick comedy angle on the hair metal thing. And you think that's going to be a pretty funny novelty thing. They'll have a couple of funny songs, and they did. Their first record, as I recall, was longlisted for a Grammy, I think, in the comedy category. So I thought, here's an interesting flash in the pan, right? These guys are wearing wigs and doing the whole thing. Well, 6 albums, and 15 years later, Steel Panther is a legit touring act with legit fans, releasing records, touring, playing the big festivals. Steel Panther is a freaking thing. And they became a freaking thing doing their own thing, all right? Presenting their own take on a genre. And it works because they are so good. For me, the thing with Steel Panther is it's never been the lyrics, all right? They got some lyrics I laugh at. Absolutely. It's a comedy act, but it's always been the music. It's always been the music, and it's always been the production. You swap in legit lyrics for the jokes that they sing, and what you've got is a great freaking band. And it works because they're a great freaking band, all right? And they have longevity because they're a great freaking band. And I've seen them live several times. They freaking crush. Such good players. And the music they write is legit, and that's why the whole freaking thing works. And so On the Prowl is now out. We talked a few episodes back about the song 1987, which it's so funny because Steel Panther is utterly irredeemable. Lyrically, utterly irredeemable. All right? Misogynist, stupid, sexist. It's absolutely irredeemable lyrically, but it's delivered in such a lovable way that you kind of let them away with it. It's really, really a lightning that they've bottled, and I don't even know how. But somehow, on the way to parodying rock stars, they became freaking rock stars. So we talked about the song 1987, which was a single released before the album came out. And it's this weird elegy to how it used to be. You know, the lyrics talk about what it was like in 1987. And there may be references to coke and hookers and bare breasts. Steel Panther after all. But there's this kind of heartfelt, touching message. It's like this elegy to how things used to be. And it struck a nerve, you know, it struck a chord with a lot of people who look wistfully back at the 80s and the way the world was and the way the scene was in those days. And they miss it. You know, they miss that rock and roll. They miss their youth. Steel Panther, strangely enough, has this kind of sentimental and warm undercurrent. I know. You think I'm having a laugh right now, but I really mean it. There's a song on maybe their last record called I Ain't Buying What You're Selling, which is this kind of really heartfelt little guitar ballad. And there's one on the new record too. All right, 1987 is this heartfelt, kind of a ballad, elegy to 87. But there's a new song on the new record called Ain't Dead Yet, which is talking about getting older. You know, there's a certain longing in it. There's a certain wistfulness in it. Even though they're talking about still being able to bang the chicks. They're not dead yet. But getting older, you know, there's this weird current of sentimentality that runs through some of the music, which is kind of touching. That's right, Steel Panther, kind of touching. All right, so the new record is on the Prowl. And again, for me, it's about the music, man. So I don't even pay all that much attention to the lyrics because the music is so good. But I like the song On Your Instagram. Very topical. You know, why can't you look like you do on your Instagram? It's a dude who falls in love with an Instagram influencer. You know, filters and all. The selfie people, you know, from the Roman Colosseum and from the Pantheon. All those folks I saw in Italy. Singer of the song, writer of the song, character in the song, falls in love with one of those influencers and then meets her face to face. And he's like, what? Why don't you look like you do on your freaking Instagram? Kind of funny, kind of clever. Good song. I like the song Teleporter, which is about being in humiliating situations and wishing somebody had a teleporter, like doing something X-rated on the Jumbotron at the ball game. But killer. I mean, just it's like a banging song. And I really like the chorus. I don't know. It's got like a Priest vibe, maybe. There's a lot of Motley Crue overtone. There's a lot of Guns N' Roses overtone on these records. And yet uniquely Steel Panther. You know, Satchel has a way, I think he writes most of the music. He has a way of using chord progressions that's kind of interesting and not necessarily what you would always expect. And so I dig Teleporter. My favorite song is very difficult to say, but I like All That and More. And that's about, well, what do I say about that? A certain piece of Steel Panther's anatomy is all that and more. So we'll leave you to imagine what that might be until you listen to the song yourself. But again, it's the chorus. You know, it's like a groovy song, and then the chorus is really heavy. And I just dig the music, and it is so freaking well produced. There's a tune called Porn Star, which is about the girl that he's in love with was hot enough to be a freaking porn star, man, but she got hooked up with me and I kind of ruined her life. As though being a porn star would have been better in some way. But just a cool song, you know. If you can look past the lyrics, maybe you don't even have to look past the lyrics. I know that there is a certain element of my listenership who comes from, shall we say, a somewhat conservative background. Might not dig on the Steel Panther lyrics, okay? Steel Panther, not for you, necessarily. Not everything is for everyone. If you don't have those kinds of feelings about things, and you haven't listened to Steel Panther, and you want to kind of laugh your ass off, but at the same time rock your ass off, this is the sort of thing I'm talking about. All That and More, Porn Star, They've got a couple of videos out for Never Too Late and Friends with Benefits. I think Friends with Benefits has one. Anyways, it's awful. All right, lyrically, it is irredeemable, misogynistic, juvenile, sexist, very, 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 with a capital B, explicit. If that's not your bag, don't listen. But if you love the rock and roll and you kind of want to laugh your way along, the new Steel Panther record, On the Prowl, is one to check out. And if you have not seen them live, it's a heavy metal stand-up show. It really is. It's so funny, utterly irredeemable, but delivered in such a heartwarming kind of way that you just sort of tee-hee-hee, and then the girl beside you is topless, and you're like, I don't know what's happening right now. That's a Steel Panther show, all right? Seen it with my own eyes, and it's a riot. It is a really, really fun freaking time. And if you're offended by stuff, not your bag, okay? But if you're not, Steel Panther is a lot of fun. Check out the new record. Go see them live, all right? One more thing, and I could have used Steel Panther for this too, is one funny thing. One funny thing. Gang, it is mid-February. As I am recording this, there's a freaking snowstorm happening outside. Supposed to turn to freezing rain tonight, so yeehaw. We'll have fun till the ice storm takes the T-Bird away. You need to laugh. Listen to Steel Panther if you want to have a freaking laugh. My one funny thing this week, and I hope it warms your freaking cockles the way it did mine. Go and watch Caddyshack. I was having a conversation with some people last night. We talked about comfort movies. Right? The movies you go to when you just want to feel warm and fuzzy, something comforting, something stable, you know? Having a rough time, something that always just makes you feel a little bit comfortable. For me, it's Caddyshack, and I got onto this back in the 90s when I was in university because I struggled really badly with winter. Why do I continue to live in the freaking snow belt? You know, the cycle continues. I will continue debating this with myself forever. I'm not a winter person, all right? I am better at winter now because I'm learning to surrender. I am learning to go with the flow, provided I don't have to drive anywhere. But I used to really struggle with winter. Like, seasonal affective disorder is a freaking thing. I hate winter. I used to take it personally when it snowed. You know what I mean? Not good. And so I discovered Caddyshack. And what Caddyshack does, apart from being a hilarious freaking movie, is it takes you out of winter and into summer. Into an eternal, perpetual summer. And Chevy Chase is so funny. And Ted Knight is so freaking funny. And Rodney Dangerfield is so freaking funny. The movie is... I have this weird affection for golf courses. Like, I sometimes think maybe just being a starter on the golf course would be a good job for me. You know, just sort of sit there in the sun all day, greet the people. They haven't got mad at their round yet. Meet them on the first tee, right? Just seeing the folks coming through, seeing the members, being in the sunshine, waving at people, talking. This is this environment around a golf course, and I think in a country club even more, which is just kind of, I don't know, a little bit heartwarming to me. Caddyshack takes me there. Perpetual, endless summertime. And I think it's such a stupid and funny movie. It really is a funny movie. And for me, it's just a comfort thing. And so you look outside right now and it's a blizzard. And this has not been a difficult winter, but it's still winter and it sucks and it's cold and there hasn't been a lot of sunshine. You need a little bit of that in your life. Go watch freaking Caddyshack. Bill Murray. Laugh your freaking head off. You couldn't get away with so much now. So many of those movies. That was 1980. And you just couldn't get away with it now, and that's too bad. Great movie. Real heartwarming comfort thing to me. I used to play golf on the computer. Back in the old days, back in the Windows 3 point whatever, there was a game called Linksys 386. Anybody remember that one? Linksys 386. It was a golf game. And I'm not sure how they did the graphics on this thing, but it was almost like, I think it was kind of cutting edge. So there were like, almost like pictures of trees that dotted the golf courses, and the way the physics worked was actually pretty good. And the characters didn't look like cartoons. Like a lot of golf games now, everything looks cartoonish. It looked real up to a point. All right, it was mid-90s. But it was more tried to be photorealistic and literally was photos. I think a lot of the graphics were photos. And I used to, in the dead of winter, just load up Linksys Golf and tunnel vision on the monitor, the greens, the sunshine, and there would be birds chirping, you know? And I'm desperate. I'm desperate to play that game again, but since we've upgraded to like Microsoft 10, Windows 10, whatever, it's like a lot of those old games, they don't work anymore. You need an emulator, you need something, and I would really like to play Lynx 386. It was Lynx 386, that's right. I would really like to play Lynx 386 again. It was a constant companion, and I created characters that were like my friends. So I'm out golfing with my friends in the dead of winter, trying to get through seasonal affective disorder. The things you do, man. The things you do. So, you want to laugh? Go check out Caddyshack if you have not seen it or not seen it in a long time. It's just a great film to watch. So let's recount, shall we? It's a good thing that music is coming back. Look at really going with the flow of life and where you put up resistance to it. The Arseblog, 21 years old now, Andrew just couldn't have seen what was coming when he started that project, and nor can you. When you start whatever project it is, dream big, man. Look around at the evidence of people who have made it freaking happen, and it is stunning. That's your inspiring thing. Check out the new Steel Panther record, and if you need a laugh, for crying out loud, go watch Caddyshack. What are your comfort movies? I'm not a big movie guy. Drop me a line, all right? Tell me what your comfort movies are. Tell me an inspiring thing. Tell me an educational thing. Tell me something I need to check out. Tell me something that's freaking funny. Mark Maron's new special came out. It's called From Bleak to Dark or something like that. Really, really good. Really, really poignant. You know, Maron's not for everybody, but he is for me. Mark Maron was a big part of getting me through the pandemic. Go check that out. Drop me a line, kids. We're up to an hour here. It's time for me to go. I hope you have enjoyed this episode. Please do consider a rating and review. I'm just really would like my cockles warm, so please consider doing that. I'm going to shutting up for crying out loud. And what else is there to say? Except thank you for listening, and hey, I'll check you later. Yeah. You take drugs, Danny? Every day.